The Tale of Genji by Lady Murasaki Shikibu, translated by Suematsu Kencho, and narrated by Elaine J. Sepani. Chapter 1. The Chamber of Kiri. In the reign of a certain emperor, whose name is unknown to us, there was among the Nyogo and Koyi of the imperial court one who, though she was not of high birth, enjoyed the full tide of royal favor. Hence her superiors, each one of whom had always been thinking, "I shall be the one," gazed upon her disdainfully with malignant eyes, and her equals and inferiors were more indignant still. Such being the state of affairs, the anxiety which she had to endure was great and constant, and this was probably the reason why her health was at last so much affected that she was often compelled to absent herself from court and to retire to the residence of her mother. Her father, who was a daignagon, was dead, but her mother, being a woman of good sense, gave her every possible guidance in the due performance of court ceremony, so that in this respect she seemed but little different from those whose fathers and mothers were still alive, to bring them before public notice. Yet, nevertheless, her friendliness made her oftentimes feel very diffident from the want of any patron of influence. These circumstances, however, only tended to make the favor shown to her by the emperor wax warmer and warmer, and it was even shown to such an extent as to become a warning to after generations. There had been instances in China in which favoritism such as this had caused national disturbance and disaster, and thus the matter became a subject of public animadversion, and it seemed not improbable that people would begin to allude even to the example of Yokihi. In due course, and in consequence, we may suppose, of the divine blessing on the sincerity of their affection, a jewel of a prince was born to her. The first prince who had been born to the emperor was the child of Koki den Nyogo, the daughter of the Udaijin, a great officer of state. Not only was he first in point of age, but his influence on his mother's side was so great that public opinion had almost unanimously fixed upon him as heir apparent. Of this the emperor was fully conscious, and he only regarded the newborn child with that affection which one lavishes on a domestic favorite. Nevertheless, the mother of the first prince had, not unnaturally, a foreboding that unless matters were managed adroitly, her child might be superseded by the younger one. She, we may observe, had been established at court before any other lady, and had more children than one. The emperor, therefore, was obliged to treat her with due respect, and reproaches from her always affected him more keenly than those of any others. To return to her rival. Her constitution was extremely delicate, as we have seen already, and she was surrounded by those who would fain lay bare, so to say, her hidden scars. Her apartments in the palace were Kiri-tsubo, the chamber of Kiri, so called from the trees that were planted around. In visiting her there, the emperor had to pass before several other chambers, whose occupants universally chafed when they saw it. And again, when it was her turn to attend upon the emperor, it often happened that they played off mischievous pranks upon her at different points in the corridor which leads to the imperial quarters. Sometimes they would soil the skirts of her attendants, sometimes they would shut against her the door of the covered portico where no other passage existed, and thus, in every possible way, they one and all combined to annoy her. The emperor at length became aware of this, and gave her for her special chamber another apartment which was in the Koro-den, and which was quite close to those in which he himself resided. It had been originally occupied by another lady who was now removed, and thus fresh resentment was aroused. When the young prince was 3 years old, the Hakimagi took place. It was celebrated with a pomp scarcely inferior to that which adorned the investiture of the first prince. In fact, all available treasures were exhausted on the occasion, and again the public manifested its disapprobation. In the summer of the same year, the Kiri-tsubo Koyi became ill and wished to retire from the palace. The emperor, however, who was accustomed to see her indisposed, strove to induce her to remain. But her illness increased day by day, and she had drooped and pined away until she was now but a shadow of her former self. She made scarcely any response to the affectionate words and expressions of the tenderness which her royal lover caressingly bestowed upon her. Her eyes were half closed.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?